Hello, pen friends. Welcome to another episode of Currently Inked. This is episode number 33. I am glad to have you here. And this episode is sponsored by Van Ness Pens at vanness1938.com. Well, I am really glad to have you here. It has been kind of a hellacious couple of weeks for me, not a lot of fun. We've had some crazy weather here in Seattle. It is the wettest and coldest winter in about 30 years here. We've had way more snow than I've ever seen. We damaged some roofs, damaged my roof. I've been dealing with contractors, which is always the brings me to the verge of rage, especially in this market where there's so much construction going on. Getting contractors to treat you like a human being is, I find, particularly difficult, and I'm not really interested in giving my money to a contractor who doesn't respect me enough to at least let me know he's not going to be showing up to give me an estimate or that sort of thing. So I've been very frustrated by that process. And then just a few days ago, I discovered or heard that the company that makes the paper I use in my Inky Fingers notebooks is discontinuing the line, and they're not going to be making that wheat straw paper anymore. And that is kind of gutting because I love that paper. It works really well. And it is hard to find fountain pen friendly paper here in the US to use in commercial, large scale commercial printing. So I'm just starting to investigate the what's possible. Yeah, the Inky Fingers notebook line, what I have is what I've got until I figure out what the next steps are. And I was really excited. I found a new printer I was excited to work with. They've got great equipment. They do really good work. I saw some samples of some of the other stuff they'd put up. It was going to totally change the Inky Fingers notebook line, and I was really excited to work with them. And then they said, oh, by the way, the company that makes your paper is discontinuing them. So that was kind of a kick in the shorts as well. Nothing new in the pen world, no new mailbag or anything like that. So I've just been, trying to, as I have said several times, trying to save my money, getting ready for the Chicago show in May. I get asked probably 5 or 6 times a week, will I be at X show? Right now, the only shows I am planning to attend for sure is Chicago. That's the only one I know for sure that I'm going to be going to. For the other ones, I don't know yet. I will probably try to go to DC. That's kind of a given. There's a possibility of Atlanta. I really don't like leaving Seattle in the summer. Summers are so beautiful here. I want to use my vacation time to enjoy the area. And so maybe I'll be looking at something in the fall. I don't know what the schedule is off the top of my head, but something around October, November, December, that sort of thing. So we'll see what else is going on. Oh, the other thing I forgot to mention, I'm going to grab my little cup of ginger tea here, my meh mug. The other thing I forgot to mention is, and I forgot to mention it when I recorded the last one, we just recently passed my 4th anniversary of using fountain pens. So I got my first fountain pen on February 23rd, 2013. Excuse me, 2013. And we just passed the 4th anniversary. So that went by. I cannot believe it's only been 4 years. I feel like I've been doing this forever. For better or for worse, I feel like I've been doing this forever. So anyway, it's been fun. It's been a lot of fun. And I never would have imagined when I bought that first kit pen from the Market Pen Maker at Pike Place Market in Seattle that I would end up here 4 years later. It's been a crazy ride. Anyway, lots of questions today. Still working through the backlog of questions. That reminds me, if you have questions for the episodes, there's a link in the video description or offpenhabit.com. It's down at the bottom of the page in the resources section where you can link, where it links off to a Google form. You just type in your name, your location, and your question. Anyway, all right. This question comes from Jennifer in San Francisco, and if this is the Jennifer I met at the San Francisco show, hi, I just sent you a letter, and if it's not, hi anyway. All right, Jennifer says, I just bought another Sailor and it didn't come with a converter. I pulled one from another Sailor pen I own and used it just fine. I always use the same converter in the same pen, and so I buy as many converters as I have pens. That got me thinking. Does it matter if you store your cartridge converter pen with the converter, empty and clean of course, in the pen or out of it? And does it matter if you use the same converter in many different pens? No, it doesn't, honestly. When I first started, I did not store my converters in the pens. I had a drawer in my pen toolkit that I used for converters, and I just grabbed whatever one happened to be handy. Over time, I have put converters back in the pen, but even then, and I store them in the pen just for ease of use when, oh, got a little Luke hair. I was brushing the dog earlier today. I feel like I'm one of those crazy people on the street grabbing at stuff that's not there. Anyway, I've started storing the converters in the pens just for ease of inking when the time comes, not because I feel like there's any reason I have to. But one thing that to keep in mind is that there are some instances where the pen will not really, even if it's a standard international converter, it really isn't truly the international standard. And so there may be particular converters that may or may not fit. So that's just one thing to keep in mind. But no, do whatever you need to do. I've had more problems with Sailor converters. I do not understand how a company can make such wonderful pens and be content putting such garbaggio converters in those pens. I do not understand. I have had those pens fall apart on me, link from the rear end, and the last thing you want from anything is rear end leakage. And I do not understand. I've got in fact, this beautiful pen right here, one of my currently inked, my Classic Pens LB5 Tairiku Amethyst. The converter that came with that, I threw it away because I inked it up twice. Both times it leaked out the back end, and I ended up having to buy another one. I've bought probably 6 or 7 Sailor converters. I can get maybe 4 or 5 uses out of them, then I have to throw them away. It drives me crazy. Sailor, if you are watching, and I know you're not, if you are watching, please, for the love of all that is good and holy, make a converter that doesn't suck. Please. You make beautiful, wonderful pens. Don't cheap out on the converter. It just drives me crazy. Anyway, so yeah, Jennifer, back to your question. No, it doesn't really matter. Next question comes from Sam here in the US. He says, do you still have your Nakaya Hekiteminori Decapod? And if so, have you noticed any variation on the green color coming through the brown? I'm interested in this pen, but vastly prefer the more subtle green look when it is new, so I'm a bit worried if I will end up liking the pen less with time. So for those who aren't familiar with where this question is coming from, the Nakaya Decapod is an ebonite pen that has an urushi coating, urushi being the Japanese poison sumac sap that turns into a lacquer. And they put several layers of a light green on there and then several layers of brown, and then when they polish it down, the green shines through everywhere that it's raised, where there's on the corners and edges and stuff like that. And the common knowledge says that colors of urushi brighten over time. Now, I haven't noticed that in my pen. I've had it for a couple of years. I do still have it. I've swapped out the nib because I didn't like the nib that it came with. But it just, I have not noticed anything. I still would not consider the green bright. If you like it the way it comes, I suspect you'll be just fine. Even if it does brighten up, it's going to be in minuscule amounts, not significant amounts. So you're not going to wake up one day and it's going to be lime green or anything like that. So I think you're going to be fine. This next question is more of a request from Ritzert, so I can't handle it here, but I did want to talk about it for just a second. So Ritzert, who has asked several questions on Currently Inked from the Netherlands, says, could you make a video comparison of some different kinds of papers like Tomoe River, Clairefontaine, and standard Staples copy paper, maybe some special others, and how several inks sheen, shade, and colorize on them? In other words, could you please do some letter writing paper reviews? So I've tried doing paper reviews in the past. I struggle with them a little bit. I'm not saying I won't do them, and it's something I'd like to get into a little bit more, but I struggle with them because I find them really boring. It's one of those things, it's like, I'm not sure it needs a full review or even a comparison video. I think it's a quick written blog post that tells you how, and a couple of photos. That doesn't seem video review worthy for me. Like I said, I'm not saying I wouldn't do it. It's just one of those things that I've tried it before and actually ended up throwing away some of the footage because it's really, really hard. There's one I did from a paper called New Leaf paper. It's a largely recycled paper I got at the University of Washington bookstore. And I wasn't real happy with the way it turned out. So I'd have to think on how I would go about doing that. So I'll think on it. Next question comes from Robert in New Mexico, who asks, have you ever used or reviewed Ogami professional paper made in Italy and from stone? I got a couple of notebooks through Massdrop, and at first I thought it was totally fountain pen unfriendly, as several tests had incredible bleeding. I have found that the ink and the nib matter a great deal. For me, Waterman ink works well, while Pelikan does not. When an ink does work, it's beautiful. Any suggestions on inks that might work best with this paper? So Robert, I would say that if it's requires very specific inks to be fountain pen friendly, then the paper really isn't fountain pen friendly. And that may be semantics. My definition of a fountain pen friendly paper is a paper that works well with a wide variety of inks, pens, and nibs. So if you're stuck using fine nibs and only a couple of inks, you might as well just grab the Staples copy paper because it's going to be the same sort of thing. Now, that's just me. Now, that brings up the question, what inks work well with inexpensive paper? Watermans are great. Parker Quink inks actually work quite well with inexpensive paper. I know because I just signed a home equity loan document using this ink with a pen that I have inked up. I'll talk about it next. So I know that that works really well. You might also want to look at some KWZ inks. Those have been really good for me on paper, especially the Iron Gall inks, and drier inks like, use your words, Matt, Rohrer and Klingner. So some of their inks, even the Iron Gall inks that they have, are pretty friendly on standard papers. So hopefully that helps a little bit. And if you find out any more, or if anyone else has suggestions, please leave them in the comments on YouTube. All right, so getting back to signing my home equity loan refinance. As part of having to redo the roof, I'm also redoing a bunch of landscaping in the backyard. When I moved in, the backyard was just an absolute train wreck. Oh, I just slopped ginger tea all over the place. Way to go, Matt. Anyway, I will talk while I clean. So I have a two-tiered backyard, and the retaining wall that separates the two tiers looks like it was put in by a kindergartner with only rudimentary Lego knowledge. I mean, it's just terrible. It's leaning over and crumbling and falling apart. And so I'm having a new one put in. I figured while they're going to be here, I might as well have them rip out the patio and put in a paver patio. I want to move a couple of my raised beds to the lower section so I can plant some fruit trees and put up some shade to block the afternoon sun from burning the inside of my house. And then there's an old area in the backyard that used to be a driveway. It was, layered with stone. Someone just put a thin layer of dirt on top of it and then grass seed. And so if you try to dig down, you hit this stone driveway. So I want them to come in and bring a bobcat and dig that up and put some topsoil in so I can actually grow things in the whole backyard and not just 2/3 of it. Anyway, so I did the home equity loan so I could cover the cost of the roof. I have to redo my electrical system and I have to do the backyard. I told you it's been a rough couple weeks. And when they came to sign the documents, he set down a pen in front of me. I'm like, no, I got a pen. I don't need to use your Bic stick, thanks. And he goes, well, it needs to be blue. I'm like, oh, it's blue. And it's not just the color, it's blue, it's got blue ink. So this is the Platinum 3776, one of the underrated gems, I believe, in the fountain pen community. Really, really great nib. This is a medium nib. I did smooth it out because I prefer a slightly smoother experience than they generally give. But yeah, it's a really nice pen, and it's not super wet, so I can use it on what I knew was going to be really crappy paper. And I don't think I put it in my book, so let me just write this out really quickly here. So this is the Parker Quink Blue Black. It's not really a blue black. It's really just a darker blue. I like it though, and it's really, really well behaved. It's a very nice ink and one I feel comfortable using in my vintage pens, that sort of thing. So yeah, it's a nice pen, or it's both a nice pen and a nice ink. All right. Next question comes from James in Kingwood, Texas, who says, I'm very much a Visconti fan. I have 5 at this time. But I've found, at least in my opinion, that Viscontis made in the 90s and early 2000s are of a better quality than some of their more current offerings. I have an early 90s Van Gogh and a Ragtime, and the quality of the nibs at least seems to be much better than current, along with the fact that they are 14 karat gold, and Visconti hardly ever offers gold nibs anymore. I'm missing something. Am I missing something here, or are they going more for the buck than the reputation? So you are not alone in this. This seems to be a pretty common complaint, and even one that I've noticed in the 4 years I've been using fountain pens. The pens I bought 4 years ago are of higher quality than the pens I'm buying now, and it's really, really unfortunate. So I have yet to hear of a good reason why Visconti thought moving to 23 karat palladium for their nibs was a good idea. I don't know anybody really. I mean, I know Stephen Brown really likes a lot of Viscontis, but I don't know anyone who thinks that 23 karat palladium is a better nib option than gold. You know, people may like the nibs, but I don't think they would be upset if they went from the 23 karat palladium to gold. So, and I don't think palladium's that much, I don't think it's cheaper than gold. I think it's actually quite a bit more expensive, but again, I don't know off the top of my head. So I don't know why they seem to have given up on quality control. I don't know. And I know that there's been some shakeup in the last several months that Dante Del Vecchio, who was running Visconti, is stepping down or has stepped down. I have heard rumors that they have contracts with some very high-end pen users, you know, sultans and princes, you know, that sort of thing. And so that's where the great majority of their money comes from, is making custom writing instruments for them. And the personal market is not such a big focus for them anymore. I don't know if that's true or not. These are the little tidbits of information you hear floating around at pen shows and things like that. So yeah, I don't think you're missing anything. I feel like if Visconti made a corporate culture effort to refocus the company on quality control and make sure that nothing goes out the door, but that it is in perfect condition, especially the nibs, they would absolutely change their reputation. I think they have some of the most beautiful writing instruments on the market. They're pretty expensive. They are pretty smart though, but they're doing some odd things with marketing, you know, naming steel nibs as Smart Touch nibs or Chromium 15 or that sort of stuff. It's like, it's a steel nib. You know, I don't, there's not a lot more I can say about it than I've already said. I do hope they can figure something out though, because I like the pens a lot. You know, I still love my Divina Elegance. I love my Divina Metropolitan. I really, really like my Homo Sapiens Bronze Age, but I found myself more and more reticent to buy Viscontis just because of the continual nib problems that they seem to have. So anyway, Vasco from Portugal, I think this might be a first for me, from Portugal. Yeah, that's very cool. Says, I've noticed some inks in conjunction with certain acrylics will leave behind a coloration inside the barrel of demonstrators even after properly cleaned. That's not particularly worrying in the ones that use converters, but sometimes not that pretty in vacuum-filled or piston-filled pens that are transparent. I agree. I've browsed through the forums, but I wasn't able to find consistent or established views on this subject. There seems to be the notion that more than this brand or that one, standard black-gray inks are safe as opposed to purple and more saturated colors. I wonder if there is a principle we can rely on. So yeah, the phenomenon you've noticed is one I've noticed too. It's one of the reasons I actually don't care for clear demonstrators that much. I love being able to see the ink in them, but I'm always worried that whatever I've got in there is going to stain the barrel. And I don't care if the barrel's stained, if it's a colored barrel or if it's a opaque barrel, but if it's transparent or translucent and it's clear, you know, I don't I don't want staining. That's not why I get it. So I have heard, I don't know that I've had enough experience to be able to say with any sort of certainty, but I have heard that reds and purples as a color family are far more problematic than blues, blacks, or other colors. I've never seen a green stained barrel, although I'm sure such a thing has happened. I would say if you are worried about it, stick with easy to clean inks. And like you said, test with converters first. Try the ink in a converter, leave it in the converter, let it dry in the converter, for crying out loud. Flush it out, see if there's a hue left over. If it happens in a converter, chances are real good it's going to happen in your piston filler or vacuum filler too. So I don't know that there is a specific rule of thumb. I would stay away from reds especially, and purples also. I've used purples in a lot of my demonstrators and haven't really had problems with them, but I have heard purples can be problematic. And then stick with colors that wash easily. So Waterman is generally pretty good. I hear KWZ is generally pretty good for washing out. Trying to think of some other ones. Diamides usually wash out, but be careful of a couple of their colors, especially the reds. Yeah, so I wish I had better information, but that's kind of where my understanding is, and one of the reasons why I don't have a lot of clear demonstrators that I use on a daily basis. This next question comes from Ramiro in Guadalajara, Mexico. Talks about he's new to the hobby and is really hesitant to consider pens over $100, which is something I used to completely understand. I'm not sure I do anymore. Clearly, I've gotten over that mental hump in my mind. He said, there are only two pens that could make me break my rule. One is an Aurora Optima, and the other is a Sailor Rialo 1911. Since any of them would require substantial savings to acquire, I'm trying to gather as much information about them as I can. I wonder what your opinions about them are. I don't really care about materials and aesthetics. I'm more interested in the writing experience and whether it is really that much better than, say, a Platinum 3776, which I already have. So the question, is it that much better, is a tricky one. Of the two, and I've never used the Sailor Rialo 1911, I prefer the Aurora Optima of the two, just from a design perspective. I feel like the Optima is far more comfortable in the hand. It has a much longer section, and it feels really, really solidly built. Now, Sailor makes wonderful pens, and both companies make wonderful nibs. And most of their nibs are quite well adjusted and a little more feedback heavy, very similar to what you might get on a Platinum 3776. What you're going to be paying for with the Aurora Optima or the Sailor is the piston filling mechanism. In the case of Aurora, you're going to be paying for materials because the materials are going to be quite a bit more complex and require a lot more time to generate, create, cure, that sort of thing, because that's Auraloid. The nibs, Sailor will have a wider variety of nib for you, so you can get softer nibs or hard nibs, medium fine, fine. You can go really, really fine if you like really fine nibs. You used to be able to get specialty nibs. That may be a little more difficult now because they've stopped accepting orders for specialty nibs. Aurora, on the other hand, you'll get a wide variety of nib tips, but the feel of the nib is going to be pretty much the same in every pen. So you can go all the way from, extra fine through true italics and stubs, and yeah, but you're not going to get quite the same variety of nib options. The Aurora Optima is also quite a bit more expensive than the Sailor. And if money's a serious concern for you, I'm not sure that either one of them is going to provide you a significant enough improvement in writing quality alone to make it worth skipping over the Platinum 3776, because the Platinum 3776 is a wonderful pen. I will say that the Aurora Optima is a whole heck of a lot more comfortable in my hand than the 3776. Although this is still a very nice pen, I much prefer this one. So there you go. Good luck, and let us know what you decide to do. All right, well, let's do, while we're here, why don't we talk about my lovely. So I loaned my Aurora Optima in blue to my dad in Utah when I was home over Christmas, and he's had it for several months and just loving that pen. So this is my green one, my baby. This is my favorite color in their production line right now. I just love this green color. Just gorgeous, gorgeous pen. Got the medium nib on it as always. I mentioned in an earlier video I had to pull the nib out to adjust it a little bit, and when I put it back in I couldn't get all the way in. It actually gave it a little bit more bounce, so I like that quite a bit. And I have that inked up with this, my beloved Diamine Autumn Oak. Such a beautiful, beautiful color. I just love that color of ink. I recently took a 2-day course to receive my Certified Scrum Product Owner training, my CSPO training, or certification, for those of you who work in project program management in the tech industry especially. And this is the pen I used. I probably took 30 pages of notes. I'm about 2/3 of the way through the ink in here, and it behaved beautifully all day long. Not a hard start, not a skip, not a hint of ink starvation. This pen is a champ. It's super comfortable to write with. I had a great time using it. I'm sitting there taking notes. Everyone else is typing away. I'm like, forget that. I'm gonna take notes by hand. Gotta use my pens. All right. Hugh in London says, what type of review do you prefer making, the YouTube videos or the website written reviews? Do you think either format has any particular advantages or disadvantages? If the only thing I had to do for the video reviews was sit down, turn on all my cameras, and talk, I would much prefer the video reviews to the written reviews. I think that video reviews actually are in many cases more valuable than the written reviews because you get to see the pen in action. There's something about even just seeing the motion of the pen on the video, seeing how it interacts with the hand, seeing how the angle of the pen to the paper, and seeing the motion of the pen in the light gives you a sense of the pen that you can't often get, even from some of the best photos. And there's some really, I'm thinking of like Ed Jelly, some really, really gorgeous pen photos out there on some of these blogs. So I prefer doing the videos. Unfortunately, the videos come with a whole backlog of other stuff that needs to be done that I really don't like doing. So I don't like taking the photos, and that's more for both the written and the video. I don't like taking the photos. I don't like creating the animations at the beginning, and I don't like editing the videos together. I don't like doing a lot of that stuff. I just do it because it's part of the package. So if were someone to say you have to do one or the other, I think I would pick video reviews, but I would do it a little grudgingly just because I knew it was going to weigh me down with a lot of stuff that is not my favorite to do. And I would love, if I were to get help on the pen habit, I think that's the area I would. Fruit flies. Got a little fruit fly infestation. I'm starting a bunch of plants in my house, and there must have been some eggs in the soil or something. I'm got fruit fly traps all over the place. Anyway, if I were to get help on the pen habit, that's the one area I think I would probably like the most help, is if I could just find someone who I trusted from a video editor perspective, who wouldn't charge me ridiculous amounts of money, because video editors, good ones, do charge ridiculous amounts of money. I would do that in a heartbeat, because it would allow me to just sit down, record a bunch of files, send them off to someone who could edit the audio, edit the video, cut in the photos, make the animations and all that stuff, and I could just be done with it. I would love to be able to do that, but I think the workflow that I have in place would be a little tricky to bring someone else in and not have to pay them ridiculous amounts of money. Because it's hard, not everyone has the capability of recording a three stream 4K video and doing full-blown audio processing at the same time. So that does make it a little bit trickier for some folks. So as for the writing reviews, I think if I didn't have to do the video reviews, I would enjoy the writing reviews a little bit more, because I could be a bit more creative. As it is, I feel a little constrained in the written reviews from time, and because I'm trying to sync the video and the written review together. I don't want them to be too wildly diverging. It's also, I find it tricky to say new things about pens, in which I feel is more important in the written review than it is in the video review. I mean, people want to see the pen in action in a video review. In a written review, for me, they start to feel very repetitive, and I have a series of phrases and language that I go to as kind of a default, which isn't really great, but it's just kind of the way it is. And so I find that a lot of times my written reviews just feel very wooden and repetitive from review to review. So if I were to do only written reviews, I'd probably spend more time trying to be creative and come up with different approaches for doing it. But, you know, I feel like I have to do both. And so I do both. I still want the videos to be kind of the main part, but the written review is something I feel like I have to include as well, because not everyone wants to sit and watch 20 minutes of a video, and there's value in that written review too, because sometimes people don't have access to video, or their connection's too slow, or that sort of thing. This next question comes from Paul in Massachusetts, who writes, "This may be an awfully geeky question, Paul. You're watching a video about fountain pens that's been going on for almost 35 minutes now. So I think geeky has, we've passed that ship. Or as they say, that ship has sailed and sunk." He says, "This may be an awfully geeky question, but here goes. I have a Dudek Modern Goods 21-hole pen block, much like this, I assume, since this is a 21-hole pen block, and really like it, as do I." He says, "But in a more perfect world, shouldn't we be able to store pens with the nib down?" Well, we can store nibs with the pens with the nib down if you want to, but I think there's a really good reason most pen holders are not designed that way, and that's because many pens will leak ink into the cap if they are stored that way. And so I never, ever, ever store my pens nib down. Never have any intention of doing so in the future. I know some people do, and a lot of pens would be fine with that, but there are also some pens that wouldn't be fine with that. So, yeah, I mean, you could, and maybe if you reached out to Mike Dudek and said, "Hey, any chance I could get even larger holes?" But the problem is, with so many pens, the clip is so varied, you'd have to have holes that were about, you know, that big around just to get the pen. So it doesn't provide a lot of support in that point. I'd say if that's something that's really important to you, you might want to look at something like a divided pen cup or something along those lines. Or you could always, you know, start up your own pen holder company. That seems to be the thing to do these days, is to take your hobby and turn it into a business. Goodness knows that's what I've tried to do. So anyway, all right, well, I think that's going to do it for this episode of Currently Inked. Thank you so much for joining me. I really do appreciate it. We'll see you here soon, of course. And for those of you who are going to be in the Seattle area on April 1st or April 2nd, you may want to consider getting a ticket to the Seattle Men's Chorus. I'm going to be performing with them, and I'm going to be singing a solo. So if you're going to be in Seattle on April 1st or 2nd, maybe get a ticket and come see me and say hi afterwards. So anyway, thanks for watching. We'll see you here soon on another episode of Currently Inked. Bye.